Today, I want to talk a little bit about run defense. I know it's not the sexiest of concepts to cover. And for a lot of people, they wonder about maybe how much run defense really matters at this point. For me, from my perspective, and looking into this and kind of looking at where the trends are going in the NFL recently, I think it's going to be the most important part of this defense beyond generating pressures, beyond being good in coverage, beyond how they tackle, beyond maybe penalties being an issue. This, to me, will be the main thing that will be the impetus upon whether or not the Seattle Seahawks defense can rise up and become really an elite unit, or if they're merely going to be a good unit. Now, part of this has to do with the trend of the NFL. Part of this has to do with the trend of Mike Macdonald's defenses. Every defense is going to have some limiting factor. There is no perfectly designed, perfectly structured defense that covers every part of the field in every place. You have to choose in some place when you're designing your defense some form of weakness somewhere. It's just the way that this works. And Macdonald has chosen that form to be in slightly when it comes to defending the run. Not as bad, but just that there's the potential weakness there. This is going to be hugely important for the Seahawks to be able to lock this down. Last year, you had a tale of two seasons really in how you stopped the run overall. You had the first half where it wasn't too good, mainly on the back of the fact that you had Baker and Dodson as your two inside linebackers, and you eventually transitioned to Tyrese Knight and Ernest Jones as your two inside linebackers, and that made a whale of a difference, and mainly just because they could get off blocks and still get back into the ball carrier. Really at the heart of why there's a bit of a vulnerability in Macdonald's defense is that he's going to typically run a little bit of the lighter boxes when it comes to defending the run than other teams might, where they'd have an extra guy down in there. And then his alignments on his defensive line are going to sometimes widen out in certain spots to provide some natural crevices there, some natural cracks for the running backs to be able to have a decent little natural hole there, unless it's really well played by the defensive linemen and linebackers. And so the whole unit's got to be on a string in a lot of ways, working together. It's about gap integrity and your gap responsibility. And if you lose that gap responsibility, it's not a defense with extra bodies down by the line of scrimmage so that you've got somebody who can come in and then cover that up. That's not the way that works then. And it's going to go for a big gain. Look, everybody's really got to do their job. Back to that Belichick, do your job, meaning do your gap integrity job. You got this gap, you got to get this, and make sure you're handling both of them. And sometimes the Seahawks will play what's called a gap and a half technique on the defensive line. And historically speaking, you'd have one gapping or two gapping you tend to ask a defensive lineman to do. One gapping, get upfield, go attack a shoulder of a lineman and get upfield, go attack. Two gapping, hold your ground and sort of just kind of read the play, have each control, be able to get to each gap. You're not trying to move to one or the other. You're basically controlling your lineman not being moved and then go find the ball carrier, go make the tackle. Gap and a half, man, that's a tough one. And talking with NFL players, I've asked them about it a little bit here and there, and they say, man, that's one that takes a little bit of touch to pull it off right. Because you're one gapping at first, but you always have to have the backup plan to get back to the other gap if you notice that you've chosen wrong, if you've guessed wrong. I'm shooting up this, oh no, it's going over this other shoulder. I've got to reroute back around. Or I've got to be quick and get ahead of the play and come back around, kind of do a whole circle move around to get back to that other gap. Rather than attack it this way, I got to come up around my lineman and curl around him and then get back into the play that way. It's really tough. It ain't easy. But this is where the importance is going to lie. This team's going to generate pressure. This team's going to cover well in the back end. This team's going to confuse offenses with the structure of what they run from the front to the back and how much they disguise pre to post snap. But stopping the run is where this will begin and where this will end, I think, for this defense, especially getting to that top end form we hope they can get to. Top 5, maybe even higher. I think if you can be great at stopping the run, you've got a lot of potentiality of getting to that spot. When you look at the NFL, there's a part of this also that has to do with something separate of Mike Macdonald's defense. And that is the running game coming back into the forefront here in the NFL over the last couple of years. Well, defending the run was mightily important when you're talking about 1985. Defending the run was mightily important when you're talking about 1995 or even 2005. But we've seen here in recent years into like the late teens area of things, early teens to late teens, where passing became center stage. And you just felt like this offenses in general were just going to keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And what's happened here is that about 2020, and with the let Russ cook era and the bombs away and trying to find an adjustment for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at that time and their ability to strike down the field, defenses really leaned into the Vic Fangio cover two shell defense. We're going to leave those two safeties on the back end. We're not bringing a safety down in the box like a strong safety in order to get more guys covered up, and we're going to cover up deep. We're going to force you to be patient. We're going to force you to take the check down, to take the short route, to just matriculate your way up the field very slowly rather than fast. And it had worked really well at stopping down the pass, and it has continued to work as we've seen the passing numbers kind of stagnate. A lot of what's at the heart of this is now starting to kind of confuse offenses in these coverages you're running, where you show something pre-snap and then you're something else post-snap. And it gets very hard for offenses to have to figure that out on the fly, especially if you're marrying it with your fronts and you're doing a lot of wide variety of things. So we've seen over this last couple recent year period here where the rushing has started to run and go forward a little bit more and more and more. The passing has gone down just a little bit. The scoring has gone down just a little bit. This shrinks the possessions in a football game. This makes the possessions you do have all that much more important now because you don't get extras. There's no second helpings on this. There's no second breakfast, as the Hobbit would say on this one. As you can see with the rushing averages, to give you guys an indicator about what I'm talking about with this, you can see in 2019, the rush average by NFL team that year went down to 112 yards, or about 113 yards a game approximately. And we can see that it was starting then to kind of fluctuate in little places, but you can see there's a little bit of an uptick. Now, I know that from general fans' perspective, they say, okay, well, it was 112.9 in 2019, and now it's up to 119.8 last year. But that's actually a pretty significant difference. Yes, it's only 10 yards, but it's a pretty big jump, especially understanding that the trend prior to this, 16, 17, 18, 19, was the devaluation a bit of the run game and more of the passing game reaching into center stage. As well, the more you're going to get in running the ball, the more that starts to roll forward, you're not going to be seeing a substantial an impact to me on the total yards or the total number of attempts, because when you look at the total number of attempts, there's a little bit of change there. For instance, this 2019 season, you had 418 attempts on average for NFL teams, offensive-wise. So 400, every team on average, about 418 attempts rushing the ball for the entirety of the season. Last year, 2024, that year you ran for 119.8 yards on average per team, 459 attempts. So 460 attempts compared to 418 attempts in 2019 to show you that the number of attempts are coming forward. The run game's becoming more of an onus now. It's becoming more important now as this goes forward. And so this trend's going to continue, along with the fact that you're seeing the passing go down, passing average go down. So 2019, we're up at 235 yards a game. 2020, the let Russ cook era, 240 yards a game up there. And then we've seen it kind of stagnant down, 228, 218, 217 this last year. So run game coming forward, going up. Rushing attempts coming up by about 40 attempts per team on average there, just 5 years back on that side of it. And then we're seeing the passing yardage go down. So again, the games get shrunken up, the possessions get shrunken up. You're not getting as many yards, you're not scoring as many points. That which you do as far as run game and your effectiveness with it becomes that much more important, because every snap starts to become just a little bit more than maybe even the prior, where you could have an extra couple plays. Maybe you get an extra possession because teams are throwing the ball. So when you get teams throwing the ball, you're getting clock stoppages. You're just going to get some extra possessions that way. If both teams are deciding they're going to run the ball, that's how you get a shrunken game, and you just don't get as many possessions. Football's kind of weird in that respect of things. When it comes to Mike Macdonald, like I was talking about, there is a little bit of that natural vulnerability that lies in his defense. And the vulnerability that lies is for the same reason that the Vic Fangio cover two shell defense has taken away the big passing attack in the NFL. Because, as I said at the top, every defense has to choose a vulnerability. So when Fangio says, I'm going to be a cover two shell guy here, I'm going to take away this deep stuff, I'm going to make teams have to really slow roll their way up the football field, he's chosen to make that weakness the lighter box. And in that lighter box, with those lesser guys, with that stretched out kind of alignment you'll have on that defensive line, that's where your vulnerability goes to. And Mike Macdonald is very much the same way. He has essentially taken your Buddy Ryan concepts with the stack boxes and the stack fronts, removed some of the blitzing from it, put on the Vic Fangio layer for his coverages on the other side, added his own little flavor within there, and there you go. That's a Mike Macdonald defense. When he first got in with the Baltimore Ravens in 2022, he was actually able to get them really good as far as their average rank. They were third in the NFL at stopping the run. So it was a very good opening year there for Mike Macdonald. And then we've got, this is by the rank, by the way, and this would be your yard per carry average. So I wanted to kind of use that. I didn't want to use rushing yards, and I'm going to give you the reason for that in regards to especially 2023 there, because in both of those cases with 22 and 23, there is some times there where you're getting to play from ahead quite a bit. And I think that this is where Mike Macdonald's defense is at its best, is when it can play from ahead, when it can take a little bit more of the risks, when it doesn't have to dial back the blitzes as much. And it also then at that point, if you're playing from ahead and that team has to play from behind, what do we know about teams that play from behind? They don't get the opportunity to run the ball as much because they're just going to end up burning clock, shrinking the game, and maybe not giving themselves an opportunity to get back into the game. So 26th in 2023 with his yard per carry rank. Last year as well, though, you were middle of the road overall in defending the run. Basically, and I'll show you a couple of metrics. You were kind of right in between 15 to 23-ish, depending on what metric you want to use. But they were 26th in yard per carry average allowed. And so that was the tale of the two seasons. That was a little bit of, hey, it's going to be a little bit rougher when we're looking at some of those games early on in the year, especially that Lions game. First one we get a little bit later on in the year when you've got your linebackers in place and everything's flowing really nice and looking really good. So the vulnerability lies there in the alignment. The vulnerability lies there in a little bit of the statistical output, though it is a sample size here for Mike Macdonald recently. Let's take a look at a couple of things just in regards to some advanced statistical data on this one. And then let me show you a little bit of tape here to kind of give you guys the full understanding on this one. I've been really digging this site. This advanced statistics site here for the NFL is just so cool. And all of the stuff it shows you and gives you just some extra little cool things with it. And so I talked about the light box, which I wanted to have you guys take note of first. And so this is light box. This is percentage of times that you're going to run a light box in the NFL. And a light box is just going to naturally be a little bit more vulnerable because you don't have as many bodies down there to stop the run. And so you can see at the top of the list here, you've got the Eagles at a 68.5% light box rate. That's very high, very high. Cardinals in there as well with the light box. That tells you, hey, this is also the same thing about us going at the Cardinals and running the ball next year is we get that light box. Let's go back at that again. We were able to attack it a couple times last year in the run game. You want to see that definitely once again there. You have your Seattle Seahawks there at 10th, rocking about a 48.6% light box rate. So top 10 defense and having a light box in this NFL. That's a little bit the part and parcel why it's actually kind of, a good thing in a lot of ways with this, because it isn't then a bit, when you look at them stopping the run, about a deficiency with having the personnel out there. It's just about, are you playing it right? And are you playing it true? You've got the guys that can get it done from, I think, a talent standpoint, but it is that question of, can you overcome at times not having as many bodies down there to get the job done as maybe some other teams would use. On the other side of it, you've got your stack box rate. You're going to run light box, then that means you're probably not running a lot of stack box. And this does turn out to be the case. It's pretty much just the inverse here from what you see on the top side of the other one, where you have the Seahawks with the stack box at a rate of the 29th in the NFL. So only the Chargers, the Eagles, and the Bills ran a stack box less frequently than the Seattle Seahawks did in 2024. But we're not stacking the box. We're going to keep it light. That's how you're going to have to get this done. A couple of other things here. These are just kind of some fun. Your team stuff rate, kind of a new stat there with it, where you see the Bills and all of them up there at the height. You've got Seattle down here, 29th. It's not the best with a stuff rate on that side of it. Rushes of 10 yards or more allowed, big rushes allowed. You've got your Seahawks right in there, kind of somewhat middle of the road, 22nd. I guess technically you'd want to have it flip it this way. So Ravens would be number 1. And then not 22nd, 11th, sorry. So not as many 10 yards rushes allowed as like the Panthers, who allowed 83 10-yard runs or more, or the Browns allowed 70 10-yard runs or more. Your Seattle Seahawks only allowed 48. So not too bad there. That's where I say there's not a lot of this data that's going to tell you, EPA, for instance, that's going to say one way or the other about what they did last year. And I think some of this has to do with, if I could parse this data a little bit by the weeks, I can go week 1, week 2, but I can't take a swath of weeks like I would like to do here to show you, okay, let me show you the first 8 weeks and let me show you the back 8 weeks. And I think that's where you'd see the substantial difference. And why you'd want to show that is because of the fact that would be the indicator about where we're going, right? We're not rocking Dotson and Baker back at inside linebacker again next year. We're not going to be down Byron Murphy for 3 games at the start of the year like we were last year after the Dolphins game. So you're, at least hopefully not. So the stats are kind of bared out by those two halves, and that makes it a little bit harder to find concrete data one way or the other, especially when it's middle of the road like this. You got EPA rush, you're right there at 16th, right there in the middle of the round. Rushing yards over expected allowed. Still not quite sure exactly how they complicate this stat. You got the Ravens up there nicely with negative 207, and your Seahawks right there at 20th here on that side of it. So not great, not awful necessarily, but this is pretty much what you're getting down the line. This is also the one I want to show you guys. How do teams attack you? Where do they tend to run the ball? Where do they go after most on that? Inside runs, A, B gap kind of runs. You see your Seahawks at 30. So kind of an interesting point of data here where inside runs, not very often. Sorry, let me get down to the bottom there. So you can see 32, you got the Cowboys, Tampa Bay at 31, and then 30. So this is your inside running percentage rate, meaning that the Seahawks were the team in the NFL that had the NFL teams run up the middle against them at the third fewest rate in the entire NFL. But this then did, of course, mean that when we go to the outside the tackles percentage of runs, this is where this starts to go through the roof. Because we can see here, your Seahawks are top 5 at 55.7% of the runs going to the outside. So how are teams going to attack us? Outside. Pitch plays, outside zone runs. These are the runs that you're going to have to stop because this is how teams are going to attack you mainly. Still a decent amount of runs inside, but definitely we're one of the higher percentage teams on the outside to where teams weren't trusting as much that we could handle and control and contain the edges. Part of why I like to always say too, with this kind of stat and seeing this, that when it starts with Mike Macdonald's defense in a lot of ways, it starts with those power edges. Those guys that can set the hard, strong edges and route the ball carrier back inside. Because that's where you start to limit the runs. You lose that edge, that's where you allow the big runs to break out. Because that you're kind of, at times, not the safety valve, but you're somewhat of a last line of defense on that defensive line as that outside shoulder, and you can't lose it. But if the Seahawks can stop the run, and why I've said that this is so important is, yeah, it's because Mike Macdonald has a slight vulnerability in his defense in stopping the run. Yeah, it's as well because of the fact that this is the recent NFL trend. This is where the game is going right now. It is going to be cylindrical and rotational, and you're going to maybe see 5 years from now passing coming back into vogue, and running game maybe becomes even more devalued back into that point again. It could happen, but for right now, for this upcoming season, this is where this is going to be heading, and where you're going to get more of the 2 tight end looks, and more 2 tight end looks born out of seeing if you're going to be able to drive defenses into nickel looks, into where you're going to have a slot corner out there on the field, and you've got a tight end blocking a 5'9" slot cornerback, and then you're able to create some games up front there in double teams and dual blocks to be able to free your running game up. So it also is going to come forward there, and this is why that is so important in addition to that, because of the trend and where this is going from an NFL standpoint wise. But the third reason has to do with being able to unleash Mike Macdonald's defense in full. And what I mean by that is that this defense becomes impossible, absolutely impossible, when you start getting teams into consistent 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9s. When you can get them into 3rd and longs, and Mike can now start to run more of the simulated pressures in the stack boxes, and then he can really, truly start to go crazy with the blitzes too. Because I think he's a guy that if it's a game where he's behind in the game or it's a very close game, I think he's very hesitant in those kind of situations to run as much of the blitzes or the stacked boxes. But you get him a little bit of the lead, you get him with an ability to stop the run on those early downs. And if you're stopping the run on early downs, you're not allowing the 4 and the 5 and the 6 yard carries, and you're keeping those offenses out of the 3rd and shorts, that's when the stacked boxes come out. And watching the tape with Mike last year, when there's those 3rd and 3s and those 3rd and 4s, he's going to kind of play it straight up at those points. He's not going to take the risks. Really, because when you start to stack boxes there on 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 4s, you're going to take like double A gap mug pressure with 2 inside linebackers down over the A gap, and you have your 4 down linemen. Offenses can now just quickly adjust, only needing those 3 or 4 yards on 3rd down to just throw a little pop pass to the flat for the running back. And those inside linebackers sometimes can't get out there to that running back in time. I mean, they get out to him maybe to tackle him, but not after he's gotten 6, 7 yards and a 1st down on the play. So you have to keep him into the 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11 kind of situations to bring out the flavor, to bring out Mike's, mad scientist kind of looks that he can drop out there, stack boxes and changing the coverages post-snap. So that's the third reason why it's so vital that the Seahawks actually are good at stopping the run this year, that they're improved at stopping the run this year, that they don't make that the easy peasy way that offenses can go after them. Because it's going to be a long day at the office if you don't, number one, but then number two, you're not able to unleash this defense in full in all the ways that you'd want to. Good news is the Seahawks have structured this up well. The question marks that you had at the inside linebacker position as you were flipping out 2 of your starters for two new starters is gone. You don't have to worry as much about that. You're returning all of your starters across the board. You've added on top of that with a couple of extra players who are going to be able to help that out. So I'm going to believe that this defense rush against the rush is going to be improved this year from where they were last year, that you're not going to have as much fluctuation from early in the season to late in the season. I think having a little bit of an easier schedule this year is going to help it in addition to that. But if you can stop the run, you can improve, if you can get a little bit above that middle of the road place of things, if you can take your yard per carry average from the 26th rate it was at this year to more of like the 13th or 12th rate, I think that this is going to allow that defense to be dominant then. You don't have to be dominant in stopping the run. You don't. You just got to be functional, viable, decent at it. And if you can do that, the other parts of your defense are going to more than carry the day. We know this defense is going to be able to generate pressure. You know you've got the dogs up front all across the board to be able to get after the quarterback. You got the secondary that can confuse you and has got the bodies back there to cover things up. So all that can fit together really well. That part's going to come no matter what. I have no doubt about that. But how you defend the run, that's going to be really the part that I'm going to pay attention to throughout the early part of this year, especially because if that comes forward, the chance for dominance from this Seahawks defense really raises. That thinking of, hey, we think they can be top 10 to, hey, this is going to be a top 5 defense, if not better, if this thing can lock into place.